Welcome to the Investor Coaching Show, a podcast to help you get an insider's view of the financial world and escape common investment traps. We look at the financial news of the day and help you make sense of it so you can relax about money. And here's your host, Paul Winkler.
All right, we are back here on the Investor Coaching Show. Paul Winkler, Evan Barnard hanging out with me. PaulWinkler.com is the website. So what we do around here, teach, because the educated investor is less likely, in my humble opinion, to get taken advantage of. And that's what we do. My wife gave me this article, Evan. It was from the Tennessean. Home versus stocks. Which is a better investment? Home versus stocks.
Oh, okay.
So which do you put more money into, your home or your investments? Which one is a better investment? My take, I'll just give you my take right off the bat, because I had a mentor that used to say this: your home is only an investment if you sell it and move into a tent.
Pretty much.
That was his thing. But you have some people that will live in the home and they have, a highly valuable home. And then what happens when they retire? They trade down. But I just don't find that. I'm surprised how little that happens. I haven't seen it that often where people do trade down in their retirement years, but it happens sometimes. But I just found that they may trade down from size,
right?
But they go from a 2 or 3 level house to a 1 level house, and the 1 level houses are more expensive,
right?
They don't necessarily save money.
I sold our 4,000 square feet and bought an 2,000 square feet.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's
I
fun.
downsized. Oh, okay.
Well, one of the things that, they were going through in the article, they were saying the myth of soaring home, they were talking about soaring home values. So that's what the premise of this article was, home values are soaring, blah, blah, blah. They said that many consumers wrongly assume home prices rise as dramatically as stocks, experts say. And they're just pointing out, no, not exactly. But then they say, well, then you got the rental value of the home and the fact that you get to live in it. So there's that aspect. There's a utility, as they call it, that a home is a physical asset. Stock is not. You can live in the home, solving that shelter problem. And that reminds me of the whole thing that I like real estate because I can touch it. And I always say, well, I like stocks because I can touch Kroger. I can touch an Apple store. I can touch, Home Depot or whatever. I can walk in and, I remember teaching my son's class when he was in elementary school. And I said, how many of you have Nintendo? And all these hands go up. And I says, Andrew owns part of this company. And I was like, he was the hero for the day
cool
in the
kid,
class.
yeah. Yeah,
he was the cool kid. But one of the things they talked about in here is how home values have soared. But one of the things they missed in the article was that I just went back to 1990 as an arbitrary date. I went back to what was the average or the median square foot size of a home in 1990 is where my brain went.
Okay.
And it was about 1,800 square feet versus what is it? It's about 2,200 square feet. So you had about a 22% size increase over that period of time in the size of the homes that people actually live in. And then what I did is I looked up and I just calculated based on that what the cost per square foot went from, and 66 per square foot to 181 per square foot. Wow. So you have, and there's other data that says it was $90 per square foot in 1990 and 162 per square foot in 2024. It can vary based on the area of the country that you live in. But the point being that if you look at the value of the homes, they haven't increased by that much, by about the inflation rate, somewhere in that
long
neighborhood.
Term, yeah,
long term, about the inflation rate. So that's, by the way, Evan, that's what I hate about capital gains taxes. Oh. And I don't hear anybody that says this in the debate regarding capital gains taxes. They talk about how the rich are getting away with murder because they're not paying very high. They're not paying a high enough rate on capital gains versus people at their regular income rates. And I wish I could see somebody pointing it out this way. But I look at a capital gains tax as partially to a fairly decent extent, a tax on inflation. Because you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you think about, why did a house go up in value significantly?
Right.
Because of inflation.
Yeah, because you weren't making donuts in the house. You weren't putting cars together. It's just a house.
Right.
Yeah.
And but that is something, I don't know why politicians don't look at it that way or ever talk about it that way, but it seems fairly obvious to me.
Yeah.
That they should.
You know, when you were talking about home versus stock, or real, and I guess home versus stock, not just real estate per se, but you know, anything real estate related that isn't a home, if that grows in value, to me, it becomes a human capital skill. I found a home that needed repair. I put in work. I created value. That's very different than just a home went up in price, or even you mentioned rentals okay, now I'm maintaining this, I'm creating value, I'm finding a tenant and so forth. I don't even view those as even apples to apples comparison of using a home to a stock market, you know, to the stocks.
Right.
And it just smells like market timing to me of real estate's gone up a lot in 3 years.
Good point.
Oh, so let's talk about real estate being better than stocks.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
We go back 50 years, it's not even close.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's like, why are they even having this conversation is your point. Yeah, they're having this conversation because they're chasing something. Right. And that has cooled off significantly. There was one guy that put out a video, and it was interesting. It was, I think he's a local real estate agent maybe, and he was just talking about the number of homes that are actually coming out on the market, and they're increasing pretty significantly in a lot of neighborhoods, you know, and that's dragging down prices to some extent, you know. So some of these changes, you know, have already started to turn to a greater extent, simply, you know, and part of it could be because of supply. Yeah, there's a lot of, I've noticed that there's a lot of places that are out there that aren't rented right now. Yeah. A lot of pieces of property that are being built that aren't rented out. And, you know, that is driving up the supply, but driving down the value to one extent. And then also interest rate increases. You know, there are a lot of things that are happening, and it just doesn't go straight up. Markets don't go straight up, and real estate doesn't go straight up. Now, real estate has a tendency to not vary as greatly. You know, the standard deviation isn't as high in many cases as the stock market, because you're dealing with more of the increase coming from, but from more steady rents. But the rate of return tends to be lower, you know, when you look at it over time, if you look at the history of that. And so interesting stuff. Home versus stocks, which is better? I think it's a bad question. You know, I'm going to own a home and I'm going to own stocks, you know, but I'm not going to look at my house as an investment unless, like I said, I sell it and I move into a tent. I think my mentor was right. Hey, just a note to you podcast folks, we just came out with a retirement income guide, and I'm super excited about this. There are all kinds of myths about taking income in retirement. People worry about running out of money, and rightfully so, because a lot of these myths can actually cause that. Now, the myths that you typically hear about, number one, dividends, living off dividends in retirement, real estate, life insurance as a retirement investment, and annuities and interest-bearing accounts and target date funds. There are all kinds of things out there. What I want to do is put something together that walks through why those things are problematic, number one. Number two, the other thing that I wanted to do is walk through the evidence-based research on taking income in retirement. And we got a ton of data going all the way back to 1900. What's the logic behind it? And it's intensely logical. So we put that together, and all you have to do to download that, making it super simple, just go to paulwinkler.com/relax, and you can actually get into that very easily right there. So I would urge you to do that. Check it out, because I think you're going to really like it. paulwinkler.com/relax. All right, we're back here on the Investor Coaching Show. Paul Winkler, Evan Barnard, paulwinkler.com is the website, of course, with tons of education, tons of videos. If you want to know more about Social Security, you want to know more about Medicare, there are videos on that. You want to know about taking income in retirement. That's the most recent video on there. the myths about taking income in retirement. And I walk through all of that on a workshop that's on the website under webinars, under the webinar tab. And, we'd like to walk through the news of the day here too as well. So that's why you jump into the podcast. It'll tell you what's going on in the world of investing and what we see happening on a week-by-week basis, because that can be super interesting as well, and how that all affects you. Speaking of real estate, Evan.
Yeah.
Trump blindsides Wall Street allies with a crackdown on housing investors. Did you see that article?
I almost mentioned it before the break.
Did you really?
On corporate ownership?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was super interesting, because that was one of the reasons that was given for real estate jumping in value, is because, these 20% of homes sold around cities, including Miami, they started off with, were being bought by someone who would never move in. And they said this past week, his firm and others across the country, that they're talking about this chief executive officer, and it was from Blackstone, his firm, and others across the country or the industry were blindsided when Trump himself, a property mogul, whom many in the sector consider an ally, said he plans to boot investors from the market.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Regained some ground later in the week, but they dropped 6% and 4.3% respectively. And that's the point we make all the time, right, Evan?
Yeah.
News comes out.
Yeah. And news that people weren't expecting, which is all news. No one's really expecting anything.
Right. By definition, news is unexpected, something that doesn't, isn't on your radar screen. It says people are scared and they don't want to touch these residential stocks. And I thought it was interesting. They're scared. They dropped that much, yet they made a point in the article, Evan, that only 2% of its real estate assets under management and 0.5% of the firm's overall assets are in these homes, and they still dropped 6%.
Wow.
It caught my attention in this article. I thought that's fascinating. It's such a small part of their portfolio, but they still dropped by that amount. And now it says, this is what Trump said in a Truth Social platform Wednesday. He says, I am immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single-family homes, and I will be calling on Congress to codify it. And the question is, can he actually pull this off? That's a big question mark. But I think it's interesting because he's being called upon to do whatever he can to make housing more affordable.
Yeah.
And this has been a boogeyman for a while, that these corporates are coming and buying this stuff. And, my take on this, Evan, is that these big companies would have no problem. Let's say if you take these big companies versus the average person that buys property to rent it out to somebody.
Yes.
Like me.
Yeah.
And I hate real estate, so I'm a good example of this. I'm not a big fan. Do I own some? Yeah, I do, simply because it's attached to my house and attached to where my office is. So that's why I do have some rental real estate. Not because I'm a lover of rental real estate. It was just where we bought. There were property, there was another house on there, so we've got it, right?
We call that protecting our flank.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So it's not like I wanted to be a real estate mogul by any stretch of the imagination. But, a person like me, versus a big corporation, what would be the difference? Well, me, I may not charge as much. I may feel worse, pushing somebody out, or, telling me somebody, the person that fell on hard times, kicking them out, whereas a corporation would be like, you're out of here.
Right.
Booting people out, versus a private owner, it's, they're going to do it much more easily. But it's competitive, so therefore, if you have multiple corporations doing it, there's going to be some competition on not charging too much. So there's that. But it's just interesting to me that this has become the boogeyman regarding why property prices have gone up.
Yeah.
It's because of these corporations. And this is just going, hey, if this is what the perception is, I'm going to do something about it, is kind of what I see happening.
Yeah. I would almost also see it as it's at least something he can put his finger on.
Right.
As
Good
opposed
point.
to changing culture, changing people's,
sure.
moving jobs all around the country. It's something tangible that he can make a statement on. Whether it works or not,
Yeah, good point, Evan. I mean, culture, because, people, one of the things that we know is that because of the overwhelm of technology, that's one of the things that's been blamed on, blame it on whatever you want to. I mean, why is it that people are buying homes later on in life? Right. Is it because homes are much bigger? That's one of the reasons we've talked about in previous weeks here on the show, is that it used to be back in the 1950s, you could buy a cracker box, a little tiny house, and
feel good about it.
And they were making them all over the place. You'd have a 900 square foot house, and just go try to find a bunch of 900 square feet houses right now. I mean, they're just not out there to buy. People aren't going to start off in a 2,500 square foot house. It's hard to start off at that particular level when you're first getting out there in your first job. But that's what people are expected to come up with. Hey, this is Paul Winkler. Hope you enjoyed today's edition of the Investor Coaching Show. If you want to learn more about what we do, go to our website, paulwinkler.com. Until next time, I'm Paul Winkler, reminding you that I believe that more educated investors are more confident investors. And confident investors are more successful investors. Have a great one. Advisory services offered through Paul Winkler, Inc., an SEC-registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced and information provided in this material are for general informational purposes only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what investments are appropriate for you, please consult with a financial advisor. Paul Winkler, Inc. does not provide tax or legal advice. Please consult your tax or legal advisor regarding your particular situation.